Hello, Internet friend. Today on Value Side, our uneven route to Dow 50,000. I'm David Ravel. Well, there's something eerie that happens when the stock market reaches a large round number level. The first time I saw this phenomena was back in 1972, and I was studying at the New York Institute of Finance when the Dow Jones Industrial Average surpassed 1,000. People went wild. New York City was ecstatic. Happy days were here again, as the old song went. It was the ratification of American exceptionalism. It was as if our team had won the Super Bowl or the World Series, and everything rolled into one. Our scorecard, the Dow, just showed we had won. Unfortunately, what most people outside a select few on Wall Street missed was that this accomplishment surpassing Dow 1000 level was the result of an old pattern that we'd seen many times before: the transformative power of finance. As markets climb higher and higher, or as Wall Street says, when the bull starts to run, it has an intoxicating effect for all involved. For investors, it gives them a feeling of invincibility, as if they have magically discovered the key to all wealth, no less for the nation's corporate managers. Those executives who sit in Mahogany Row begin to feel that they too have discovered the answer to endless profits. CEOs and CFOs who began as experts in a given field suddenly feel that they can manage any enterprise because they found that key to wealth and success. This feeling of invincibility, described by the ancient Greeks as hubris, often leads to the same tragic end Homer described long ago. Portfolios decline, corporate profits fall, and overall, the nation's wealth declines. In 1972, I saw this equation vividly at the annual meeting of one of the most popular companies of the day. Investors touted this company's stock as one decision stock. All you had to do was buy the stock, sit back, and watch your profits roll in. Ling Temco Vought, LTV, the one decision stock, a sure thing, can't lose company that everyone should have in their portfolio. Along with 49 other stocks like it, LTV was part of the Nifty 50, 50 companies that were sure winners, bound to reach higher and higher plateaus of prosperity and wealth. And it was mainly the Nifty 50 that people cheered on that November day in 1972 when the Dow passed a grand. What many LTV investors missed, however, while the Dow climbed into the stratosphere, was that LTV, the company, was struggling to barely keep its head above water. Now, there are three things that every corporate manager, especially of a public company, must be aware of at all times. First, their markets, the customers that purchase their goods or products. Secondly, the manager must be aware of the cost of funds, especially if they have a substantial amount of corporate debt. And finally, the manager, be they CEO or CFO, of any corporate officer must report to investors an honest, forthright accounting of their latest result. As it turns out, LTV would fail on at least two of those requirements. The cost of capital. Now, the first of LTV's executives to fall was James Ling himself, the founder and CEO. For 23 years, Ling had guided LTV to a series of dizzying successes. He had managed the expansion of LTV into such fields as aerospace, airlines, steel, manufacturing, pharmaceuticals, sporting goods, and meat packing, all done through corporate acquisitions, most of which were funded by additional corporate debt. It's that last point that's critical. As it is, it's the reason that LTV board ultimately relieved him. You see, in the late 60s through 1982, it was a time of extreme debt volatility. The Federal Reserve whipsawed interest rates at an alarming rate, and it was those same interest rates that made the difference between a highly profitable LTV acquisition and a losing one. Ling was caught in the middle of these up and down interest rates. From the time James Ling founded the company in 1947 until the mid 1960s, short term interest rates in the U.S. were reasonably steady at around 4%. However, in what must have seemed a shot from the blue, in the summer of 1967, the U.S. Federal Reserve embarked on its most aggressive interest rate hike ever. From a low of just 3.9% in July of 67, the Fed raised rates to 9.2% over the next 24 months. Consequently, borrowing rates also tripled. For Ling, this would mean that finance charges on his acquisitions suddenly were 3 times higher. $1 million loan would go from $30,000 per year in interest to $100,000. Ling's portfolio of highly profitable corporate subsidiaries was now losing money after finance charges. Someone had to be blamed, and this time it turned out to be Ling himself. In 1970, he was forced out by the board of directors, the first casualty of a nifty 50 corporate calamity. The circle of competence. Around the time James Ling was packing his bags at LTV and returning home to Texas, two young entrepreneurs were founding an investment company that would become one of the most successful of its kind ever. Warren Buffett and Charlie Munger founded Berkshire Hathaway in the early 1970s and developed the concept of the circle of competence as one of their chief value criteria. Briefly stated, Buffett and Munger would invest only in companies whose management had a demonstrated competence in their field. Now, you may have noticed that in addition to electronics and aviation, LTV added a sporting goods company and a meatpacking company when it acquired Wilson and Company. For me, the reach of LTV's acquisitive nature came to an amusing conclusion in the fall of 1973. I was a stockbroker then with E.F. Hutton and decided to attend the LTV annual meeting. Brokers were often invited to attend annual meetings. I just gave the receptionist my business card and was ushered into one of the most amusing such meetings of my career, and I've been to more than a few. Paul Thayer was now the CEO of LTV, a distinguished former test pilot and aerospace executive, and he was later to become the U.S. Undersecretary of Defense. Thayer was immediately put back on his heels as an angry crowd of investors demanded to know why their stock had fallen so sharply. One particularly irate investor reported that his stock, at around $3, was worth less than LTV's dividend had been just a few years before. Now, to understand what happened next, you have to know that the makeup of these LTV investors in Beverly Hills was largely a Jewish population. Three-quarters of the attendees at that evening were Jewish. In an effort to mollify the crowd, Thayer then invited them to receive a gift prepared especially for them, a Wilson canned ham. As you can imagine, this kosher audience did not think much of Thayer's gift. Conclusion. As we look back at the 142 years since Charles Dow invented the Dow Jones Industrial Average on July 3, 1884, we see the mountain chart of progressively higher investment records. Each generation builds upon the work of those who came before. It's a visual representation of the country's financial progress. Admittedly, one with some mistakes and hardships, recessions, and even depressions. After all, even the finest of corporate results sometimes deliver a ham. And that's today's Value Side. For all of our articles and podcasts, visit valueside.com. I'm David Ravel. Value Side is independently written and produced. The views expressed are strictly my own.